Chapter 6. Double Ingenuity. It was the day after the banquet. A gloomy vibe hung over the entire office. The source of it all was Wine, who was splayed out on his desk, oozing misery. To his side was Ninim, whose face was plastered with a pained look. "Hey, Ninim," he called out, face firmly planted on his desk. "Yes, hear me out. Let's say, for example, that the son of an aristocrat from the country next door was beckoned to our kingdom by a letter that's super suspect. And that he died there. How would it look to everyone else?" Ninim paused for a beat. "Like he was assassinated. Without question." "I knew it." Wine howled, snapping his head up and banging his hands against his desk. "Like, come on. Why? Why'd you have to die, Geralt? You get all riled up with envy and challenge me to a sword fight that you have no chance of winning at that. And then you try to take out your anger on me for losing by launching a friggin' surprise attack. But that somehow leads to you fall out of a window and snap your neck? You're impossible. Come on. He really just up and died, huh? And I'm probably next. Our plan didn't just fall through, it's in smithereens. At this rate, we'll probably be at war with Ankadal, not to mention the Empire." Which made sense, since Geralt had been the child of Marquis Ankadal, a well-known household in the Empire, honest-to-goodness nobility. Considering how Geralt had died in a foreign country that had requested his presence, the two forces had more than enough justification to invade them. "Oh, why? Why did it turn out this way?" "I just wanted to butter him up and get him to go home with Lowelmina," Wine moaned to himself, as if casting a curse, and buried his face in his hands. Even Ninim sympathized. How could they have predicted the tables would turn? But they couldn't leave the situation as is. "I promise to listen to your rants when this is over. But right now, we have to switch gears. Let's think of a plan from here on out," she reasoned with him. Gwerk. He let out a loud grunt like a wandering spirit before pulling himself out of his melancholy look. "First things first. I don't think the Empire will make a move anytime soon." "Agreed. Right now, they're divided into the three factions in the fight for the throne. They don't have the leeway to invade Natra immediately. Then there's Marquis Ankadal. Have we secured the servants that accompanied Geralt?" "Secured and placed under house arrest, for the most part. But we're missing two of them. According to the testimonies of the other servants, those two were new hires. Quick on their feet for servants of that moron. Do you think news of his death will promptly reach his father?" "The odds are high. Plus, Lowelmina's envoys are eyewitnesses. They'll want to report his death back to the homeland. And it's not like we can place them under house arrest, too. Which means Marquis Ankadal will hear about it sooner or later." But Wine went on, he won't act right away after he finds out. "I'm gonna bet he'll waste time thinking, debating, fretting over the motives of his son's assassination. And he'd never guess that it was an accidental death. Not in a million years." "Yeah, no shit. Me neither." Wine wailed. Ninim attempted to pacify him. There. Relax. We've got to take action before then." "You're right." Wine heaved a huge sigh. "My thoughts, Loa's thoughts, Ankadal's thoughts, and everything in between. It's all a jumbled mess right now. Whoever takes the initiative will gain a huge advantage. In other words, the playing field is even. More like we're all backed into a tight corner." "Shut it. Don't be all doom and gloom. I know hindsight is 20/20. But if I stay in the lead, I've got a good shot making those conspirators sorry. I think." A knock came at the door of the office. The official in charge of hosting the Imperial delegation appeared in front of them. "Pardon me, Your Highness. Princess Lowelmina has just requested an emergency meeting." Gwa. Wine was about to internally burst into tears. "What do you wish to do?" "We can't refuse a request from the princess. Bring her here." "Understood." The official departed, clicking the door closed from behind. A few moments of silence passed between them. Ninim whispered, "And she's taken the lead." "Enga." Wine yowled. "This is real bad. I haven't figured out what she's up to. Maybe she'll lodge a formal complaint against you for letting Imperial nobility die on your watch? Possible. And if she does, I bet she'll toss in a few of her own demands." But Wine's thoughts didn't race fast enough because another knock came at the door before he could reach a conclusion. "Princess Lowelmina has arrived." Damn it all. You could have taken your time. He mentally berated the official. Lowell came in and bowed toward Wine. Apologies for taking time out of your busy day. There isn't a single door in Natra that's closed off to you, Princess, Wine replied with a stiff smile. But we've been dealing with the incident from last night. I would appreciate if we could keep this brief. He'd find his move while he kept her in check. Wine was fueled by sheer determination. Give it to me. Give it to me good. I vow to myself that I'll fend you off. He couldn't let Lowell take the lead here. He didn't know what her demands would involve, but it didn't matter because he'd turn them down. That was the only answer. I'll keep it short. Lowell cleared her throat. Wine steadied his breath. I surrender. I'm sorry, what? Wine couldn't stop a discomposed squeak from coming out of his lips. Geralt is dead. Grynahy dropped the documents in his hands when news from his steward registered in his brain. What? Why'd he have to die? Sir Gerald's servant just rushed in and informed us that he fell to his death at the palace in Natra. Don't be ridiculous. This must be a mistake. That's what I thought, until they gave me this. The steward passed a dagger to Grynahy. He'd never mistake its inlaid jewels. According to the servant, who just barely escaped, all other members of his entourage were captured by Natra soldiers. Grynahy felt as if his legs might give way. He placed his hands on the desk nearby to steady himself. He spoke in a tight voice. Where is that servant now? Resting to recover from extreme weakness. They haven't had anything to eat since fleeing Natra, after all, I understand. Ask for the full details when they're up. And leave me be. I need to think alone for a while. Don't let anyone come near this room. Yes, sir. The steward slunk away and left. When Grynahy was all alone, anguish crawled on his face. What's going on? Why did this? Grynahy unconsciously let spill from his lips. These questions had taken control of his heart. Gerald was dead. He died in foreign territory. From illness. From an accident. No. Gerald had been assassinated. Of that, there was no question. Then why? Why did they have to kill him? It all started with that letter. It was a trick to lure him out. After finding out Gerald had fallen in love with Princess Lowell, the enemy had timed the letter to arrive when he was back at the mansion and lured him. In other words, it had all been a scheme by Natra. The fact they had captured his servants was proof. It had to be to silence them. Why did Natra need to kill him? They could have held a grudge against him. But would they go this far? I mean, we're imperial nobility, and he's my kid, the son of a marquis. Call him out and assassinate him? That'd be reckless. Even if they could keep the servants silent for now, the truth would come out eventually. It was tantamount to picking a fight with the Empire. That's when Grynahy realized something. Yeah, my son was murdered. That's enough reason to invade. Then, Princess Lowell will be. Grynahy was stating his problem in reverse to think through it when a doubt popped into his head. What if she knew about this assassination plot the entire time? After all, though the letter had been sent under the Crown Prince's name, its contents were written according to her will. If the prince hadn't worked alone but sent the letter with her permission, that would mean they were conspiring together. Why would the imperial princess and crown prince join forces to assassinate an imperial aristocrat? No way. Grynahy's body shivered with premonition. They must have caught on to our rebellion. To him, this was the worst possible scenario. Lowell couldn't possibly know everything. If she discovered the entirety of their scheme, she wouldn't act in this roundabout way. That said, the smidgen of intel she had must have continued his involvement. That was when she'd started sketching out a plan, making a deal with the crown prince to lure Geralt. And from there, they'd tried to get him to spill the details about the revolt. And if they killed him, that means they've gotten what they wanted. How much did Geralt know? When it came to the revolt, even Grynahy hadn't said a peep to any third parties, not even his own son. But there was a possibility that Geralt had seen the soldiers and weapons that his father was collecting. He must have felt something was amiss. If Geralt had known the full details and disclosed them, then they couldn't waste time fighting Natra. There was a chance that the Empire had received news and dispatched their troops to confront him. Get a move on and put up our defenses. Wait. Or think of an excuse. Or maybe I should capture the princess. But his thoughts whirled around in his head, but he couldn't come to a conclusion as he felt impending doom weigh heavily on him. The situation had completely pushed Grynahy beyond his limits. With no choice but to think of something, he continued wandering through a mental maze that had no exit. What in the world? Grynahy hadn't been the only one to receive news of Gerald's death. There was a servant who'd escaped captivity, sent secretly by Owl. It was one of his underlings, and this information had just now reached his ears. Gerald died, huh? Shit. At a time like this. The Crown Prince and Gerald were demonstrating their swordsmanship for Princess Lowelmina when he passed on, but I'm guessing he was assassinated, though there's a good probability it was an accident. It has to be more than that. Not even Gerald would be stupid enough to just up and die in a foreign country. But if that was the case, what was their motive? Of course, I'll reach the same question as Grynahy, though unlike the Marquis, he knew there was something more important than finding the right answer. If Naitra and Aunt Gadol go to war, it'll attract all eyes and ears. Our scheme to rebel isn't complete. We must avoid any unwanted attention. Owl ran through the possibilities and arrived at a decision. Tell everyone. We're switching strategies. Before Lowelmina had headed to Wine's office, she'd faced Fish and groaned. This is a problem. She'd been planning to use Gerald to drag Naitra into her schemes and accuse Marquis Aunt Gadol of high treason. But that ploy had been smashed into a million pieces. Wine wasn't the only one clutching his head and lamenting that all hope had been dashed. Fish, are you absolutely positive that he's dead? Yes. I inspected the body myself. There is no mistake or doubt about the cause. He snapped his neck. Instant death. I see. Which makes me think he hasn't been assassinated. It was clearly an accident. Lowelmina exhaled long and slow. Fish had on a grave look. With all due respect, Your Highness, we should consider returning home for the time being. The princess's gaze sharpened, but Fish did not falter. Our plan has been on thin ice since the very beginning. For it to work, we had to guarantee that no one knew of this scheme. But the prince saw through it, and our plan to use Lord Gerald has amounted to nothing. While your brother's vassals may be shaken by his death, they will be suspicious if you try to extend your stay. I advise against forming any new strategies here. It will only bring more trouble. Her argument was sound. They'd been able to convince the delegation to remain in Naitra by citing Gerald's death, but most had no idea why he'd shown up or why Wine and Lowelmina had both warmly received him. There was no doubt that she'd be the target of their suspicions soon enough. I'm aware of your desire to save the Empire and inherit the throne. I know that this plan originally had the biggest potential of realizing it. But that opportunity is now lost. Yes, Fish nodded with great distress. Even she was tortured by their situation. Fish owed Lowelmina for lifting her out of obscurity after she'd lost her position as ambassador. She'd granted her another opportunity to serve the Empire with her blessing. And Fish was drawn to Lowelmina for fighting for the throne as a woman, especially because she'd slammed into the glass, sealing herself as a successful diplomat. She wanted to aid Lowelmina in overthrowing this whole system. Plus, the princess's wisdom and love for her nation were absolute. How many members of the imperial family would willingly place themselves in a foreign country as bait? If only the plan had worked. But there was nothing they could do. Fixating on our missed prey will only leave you in danger. Let's return to the capital and sketch out our next plan. In this situation, the safety of the princess took priority. Even if Lowelmina resisted, she would ultimately return safely to their homeland. This was Fish's job, and she would make certain that it was carried out. Fish, Lowelmina called out, sonorously yet coldly. Fish's heart constricted. As a vassal, she knew it was a great dishonor to keep silent out of fear of displeasing her superior. She may have been appointed to her position only a few months prior, but she already understood that Lowelmina deserved her honesty. Fish was going to put her foot down, without going back on her warning, no matter what. Out of nowhere, Lowelmina hugged her, squeezing her tight. Why, Your Highness? Fish stammered, eyes wide in bewilderment. Well, what, is the meaning of this? To tell you the truth, I've always wanted this. To be admonished by a trusted vassal. No one has ever put me in my place. Oh, how childlike, Fish thought when she realized something. The princess was a teenager. Her resourcefulness made it easy to forget at times. But now wasn't the time for this. Fish hardened her heart. All right, enough dilly-dallying. We're in a race against time. This must wait until later. Yes, I understand. Mina let go of Fish and beamed. Every word of your warning was true. If we stay any longer, my life will be in danger. Then, she started. But my life is trivial. Fish went bug-eyed. Mina continued. With my path to the throne thwarted, I must prioritize peace in the empire, as the imperial princess and as a patriot. And you'll risk your life to see that through? If I know that's for the best. The two gazed at each other in silence. Their eyes reflected their determination, their wills clashing against each other. It went without saying that Fish was the one to give up. You're the rightful princess of the Earth World Empire. You cannot just throw away your life. You must never forget that. Thank you, Fish. There's no need to thank me. I'm your vassal. And it's not as though we've solved our conundrum, Fish reasoned. Even if the princess's will was set in stone, it wouldn't get them past the difficulties standing in their way. About that, I intend to visit Prince Wine. Can we rely on him? We both wish to preserve the empire. If I give up on my personal goals and work solely for the sake of the empire, I'm willing to bet he'll cooperate. In theory. But people have emotions. From his point of view, we're sworn enemies who have brought calamity upon Natra. To think he'll readily agree, no need to worry. He's the type of person who can disregard his personal feelings when it benefits him, Mina declared with a wry smile. Well, if he does refuse, we'll flatter him best we can, though I don't know how far that'll get us. If it comes down to that, I shall accompany you. Fish gave a low bow in the face of her master's resolve.